start with you a React session. Inshallah, this series will contain multiple sessions about React, its components, how to deal with the components. But in the first session, this session today, inshallah, we will just talk about normal introduction and refresher about JavaScript ES6 concepts, which we will use it during the React sessions. And from that, Mu'taz will start, inshallah, explaining the first part. After that, and I will continue, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mu'taz Muhammad. I'm going to start with an introduction about React. First, what is React? A script library used to develop JavaScript-driven apps. React apps run in the browser, not on the server side, which gave us a great advantage. Things happen immediately when you use React, since it's running in the user computer. We don't have to wait for the server response to get a new page or render something new. And the main is to build user interfaces. User interfaces is what the user sees. And React is all about using components to build them. In React, you don't have to build your entire web page as one big picture. You can build each one. Which takes us to why should we use React? First, as mentioned before, React web pages is built using independent components, which makes it easier to work in groups. You can think of components as contained pieces of code that are independent, which make them easily managed. Since they don't affect each other, it also allows the components to be reused. You can create a header or a list, then use it afterwards in a different layout or different, or even a new project. It's very flexible. Also, React features a huge ecosystem and an extremely active community, which means there is a good chance you can find a solution to a given problem or even an extra package you can add to fix it, since it's library based. Now we're going to see an outline of what we're going to learn through the sessions. First, we're going to start today by giving a general introduction to JavaScript Refresher. Since React is a JavaScript library, we're going to highlight some concepts that will be heavily used through the sessions. Then in the upcoming sessions, we'll also cover React basics and how to interact and utilize the components. For example, passing data to components and other basic concepts. Then we'll move on to component styling. Since React is focused on the user interface, it's important to learn how to style your components. Then we'll move to debugging, because errors will always happen. So you need to learn how to handle your errors, how to fix them, and to find where exactly the bug. Then we'll move to debugging. I mean, at the end, we're going to take a deep dive with about the components to learn more advanced concept about how to use components. And finally, we're going to apply all the concepts together. And now my friend Mohammed is going to start with a JavaScript refresher.
Yes, thank you, Mu'taz. Can you let me just share my screen? And here we go. Okay, enough talking, enough theoretical talking. I don't like theoretical talking. I like to start the practical things. So let's just start with what the main thing in JavaScript. Now, we all know that defining variables, using variables, is the main thing. Let's say in programming, we used a lot. Okay, it's the basic building, let's say, block. Okay, Now, before ES6, before JavaScript ES6, we used to use a variable, and we defined as var something, var x equal 5. It's just a variable, okay? Now, after this, they started to notice that, okay, there's variables that we use a lot, we change its values, and there's another type of variable that we don't. Like defining a variable, let's say, as I said, x equal 5, maybe after a while it will change. Maybe in the loop, when we used to say for integer I equals 0, and it loops, and the value of I, it changes, okay? But sometimes in JavaScript we don't need to change, we need a value to stay constant, okay? So they came with the idea of using let and const, okay? When using let, it's there's a variable, the value of the variable will be it allows it to change, okay? Like in this example we can see that yes, yeah, in this example you can see that I have a variable called my name, and I signed to, if I log it, it will result in just printing the name, okay? After that I can change the name and console log it again, and it will change, and there will be no problem. But using const, the const keyword, by the way, it's small c, and let is small and not capitalized. Anyway, using const, it will make the variable as constant value. يعني this value will not change. Okay. Now I use const my name equal, and I assign a value for it. I can console log it, and I can use it wherever I want. After that, I will use it again, but I can't change its value. My name, I can't change the value of this variable my name, because I assigned it as const, and it will show for me even the error that assignment to constant variables. Okay. Now, why we use this? Basically, the main idea of using let and const is, first of all, to make the code more readable, and let's say more understandable. Okay. And the second part, that it enhances the performance, let's say, a little bit. Okay. So that the program knows that this constant, this value, if it's const, it will not change. It doesn't need to allow to change later. It will stay like that. Okay. We will see later how we will use this const. We will use const mainly for functions. Let we will use it for sure, but not that much like const. Okay. We will see later how to use this, inshallah. Okay, after talking about the let and const type of variables, let's say, let's talk about functions. In JavaScript, we have functions, and in every programming language, we have a lot of functions, okay? And in JavaScript, let's say the old JavaScript, the syntax of writing a function, it will start with keyword function and the name of function, parameters, and curly parentheses to write the code inside it, okay? But in ES6, we will start a new thing called arrow functions, okay? These arrow functions allows us to solve a problem with this keyword, okay? So using this keyword inside this arrow function will not result in an unwanted behavior. So as we see, is by the way, there's a problem here with the first letter. It's always capitalized. But anyway, const is always, it shouldn't be capitalized. Anyway, so, and we will see that later, inshallah. So as we see that we defined, let's say, a word called myfunc, okay? And it's a constant. Now I can make this as a variable, normal variable. I can assign it to 5, 6, or whatever, or I can make it as a function. So how can I make it as a function? I can make it as an arrow function. Here we will write the parameters, and here, and this arrow um, tells the program this is an arrow function. Okay, inside it I can write a normal function like any other function. But the point is that using this approach will help us in solving the problem of using this keyword. Okay, and that's the let's say the modern JavaScript how they use it. Okay, now let's say about the arrow functions. What if we have no parameters, no keyword, or one parameter, how can I write it, or more than one parameter? Okay, if I have no parameter, there is an example of I can assign a function like that, const my function, and there's no parameters, and I can do whatever I want inside the function, and I can call the function. If there is one parameter, I can write it in one of the two ways. I can keep the parentheses, it's okay, and I can pass the parameter here and use it. And when I call, of course, I can add the parameter here. But remove them because it's only one parameter, and this only works with one parameter. I can't like write something like my name and then a comma and there's something else. No, it will not work. It only works with one parameter. If there's two or more parameters, I can use it like this way. Okay. Now, what's the idea of? Let's say there's even a shorter approach when using arrow function, that this arrow can remove the return, and let's say it does not remove it, it replaces it in case there is only one line. Okay, if the function contains only one line, I can write it like that. There is an parameter passed, and it returns this parameter used, and whatever calculation, whatever the thing I want to do, this is used. I use this instead of return when I want to do a one-line function. Okay. Okay. Now we have finished the variables let and const. We have finished the arrow function. Let's start with let's say a main concept in React, which is importing and exporting. Now we use a lot of components in React, and as we will see later, that React is basically components, a lot of components. Okay. Now, to use these components together, I have to import and export them. Like, let's say I have a component, okay, and I'm using it, and later I want to use another component inside it. So I have to import that component. So how do I know what to import from that file? I have to export, to specify what should I export. So let's say we have this person.js file, okay, and it contains this person, and I export it. Okay, I can export it like just export person or export default person. We see here that we export the const clean or base data or whatever we want, but we can use default. We use just export. Okay, when using default, there is no need to write the name inside the curly braces. This, all of this we will use it later. We will discuss it even more in detail later, why we use this and why we don't use this, but I keep it here in the slides in case you want to refer for it later. Okay, so we use the default. When we use it, we don't need to write these parentheses. Instead, we write assign for it a name from, and the let's say the file we want or the component. Okay, we can even write any name. We can assign any name we want. It's not like we are limited to the person keyword or word. I mean, okay, we can write any name here. That's why using export default, it allows us to write any name, because there's the default thing that will be exported from this file is the person. So whatever the name I write here, it will export person always. Okay. But here, in this case, there is a lot of exports, or let's say there is no default thing to export it. Okay. So in this case, when we import, we have to specify which thing that we want to import. In this case, we are importing base data. We have to write it as import base data from utility.js, okay, or import clean to use it inside the app component. Okay. That's another one that just to specify the differences. You can read it. It's exactly the same as I mentioned. Okay, now let's dive into classes. We have finished import and export, arrow functions, and variables. Okay, let's dive into classes. Okay, now I don't want to just read this and tell you. Let's try to write here. Okay, so first of all, I'm using here ES6. Okay, so that we don't get errors, and this website is JSBin. It basically compiles JavaScript code. Okay, so let's start by creating a class. I have predefined classes. Let me just copy and paste them and explain what's going on. Okay, let's say that we have a class person, okay, and the class human, and we are inheriting the human class inside the person class. Okay, now in this case it's worth to mention that there is something called inheritance. For sure you have heard about it, but let's explain what's inheritance. In inheritance, the class that inherits the properties and methods of other class, it's allowed to use and add properties and methods to that class. Okay, now let's say each class have its properties, one or more properties, have its functions, methods, whatever you want to call it. And after that, we can use that class by creating an object of that class, and this object we will use it to use the function of that class, and etc. Okay, so now this class have functions. Maybe I want to take properties or functions from other class, so I have to extend it, or let's say to do the inheritance between the two classes. Okay, so as we said here, we have a class person that extends a human. The class a human have a constructor. By the way, this is the old way of writing classes in JavaScript. We will, after that, we will show you how to write in the ES6 way. Okay, let me just run it. Okay, okay now. Okay, now this class human have a constructor that creates the properties of it. We have one property, gender. It's assigned to male, and that have its function, print gender. Okay, and we have another class person. Okay, now this class person extends human, which means it can use the gender here. Okay, which is the property of a human, and the print gender here. But in case to use it, and again, this is a vanilla JavaScript. This is the old JavaScript, not the new one, not the modern, let's say. Okay, and in order to use it inside the constructor of the new class, we will have to call a super method. This super method will allow us to use the properties and methods of the extended class, the inherited class. Okay, now we can even assign the value. We can even update the value of this. Okay, now it was here male. Okay, after that I have assigned it to female. Okay, and when I use it later, it will show me a female result, which means that the value has been overwritten. Okay, so using an inheritance between classes, it can affect the properties, and it can also use the functions of that class. I have used here person, which is this class, dot print gender. Now person is the object of that class, of the person class. Okay, it's not like it's an object of a human class. I don't have an object of a human class, which means I can't use its function. But because I have inherited it in the person class, now I can use its functions and its variable, let's say, properties. Okay, and as you can see, we have used the function of which is print gender here of a human class, and I can use the print my name function. Okay. Now, how to enhance this code, how to make it ES6 code, we can just simply do it like this. Now ignore this error, it will work, okay, and it's a correct code, but it's because the compiler. Okay, anyway, now inside the class human, we don't anymore need a constructor keyword. We don't need to use even this dot gender. We just can assign the property gender equal male or whatever I want. Okay, and we can have the function as an arrow function, even as we have mentioned before. It's a print gender, okay, and it equals an arrow function. There is no parenthesis here, and it returns a console.log this gender. Okay, and in the another class person which inherits the properties of a human class, we don't need even to use super. We don't even need to use constructor in all of these things. I can just write name equal max, gender equal female. Now, gender equal female will override the gender equal male. But how does it know? It's because I have inherited the two classes. I have inherited the human class properties inside the person class. They are merged now. So changing any value, it will affect the human class also. Okay, if the properties, the value of the property changed. Okay, now even the print my name function, I have used it as an arrow function to show you that we can use it. By the way, these codes, I will provide it later, inshallah, with a document that explains, let's say, everything I have said until now, and I will, when I finish, everything about JavaScript ES6 Refresher, I will send it to you, inshallah, with along with these codes, so you can revise it whenever you want. Okay, now we have created also an object of person, and we have used the same functions. Now, if I clear and run, it will show me max female. Now I can change it to, let's say, it's here male also. It's here maybe female. Oh, whatever. Okay, it will be a male here, okay? Which means it have been overwritten again, which means this code is working perfectly. Now, these concepts of creating classes, inheritance between classes, it will be useful when creating components, because now I can create component as one of the two methods of creating components is creating component as a class. We can inherit the properties of another component also, and we will talk about that inshallah in the next session. But for now, keep in mind that using these concepts will be inshallah used with us, and whenever we use anything of it, we'll mention again that this is a class and this is an inheritance and these things. So you don't need to worry about remembering a lot of things. Inshallah, whenever we reach anything, we will explain it again in the code, inshallah. Okay, we go now for the yeah. Maybe this is new for some of you, which is called spread and rest, and it's well, to be honest, it was new for me when I learned it course. So yeah. Anyway, using a spread is and rest syntax. It's just 3 dots, and yeah, don't it's only 3 dots. Yeah, I know it's maybe confusing, but it's just 3 dots. Trust me. Okay, now using 3 dots, it can be used as spread or rest. When using it for an array or object, it will be called a spread, and we will show you what's the code, and we'll show you an example for it. And when using it for an argument of an array, for an argument of a function, it will be called rest. Okay. Now let's try some spread and rest. Let's try first of all the spread. Okay. Now what is spread? Spread is basically copying the contents of an array or object inside another new array, let's say, but with maybe some modification. Now, in this example, I have an array called numbers. I have created an array called number, constant numbers equal 1, 2, 3. It just have 3 elements, okay? And after that, I have created a new array, and I have copied. I have used these 3 dots and that's the name numbers to copy the values of numbers array. Also, I have added a new value 4. Now, when printing this new array, it will show me the values which are 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not just 1, 2, 3. Now, if I have changed this, I'm sorry. If I have changed this and cleared and run again, it will show me 1, 2, 4, which means that it's correctly copying the contents of numbers here and pasting it inside new numbers. Now, we will later talk about why do we use this. Inshallah, after the slide after that, inshallah, why do we use spread? Like, why can't I just write maybe const my array equal numbers? Maybe I can even add after that at the end of it, maybe I can add, let's say, my array at the place, let's say me equals 4 or something like that, so I can add the value. Why don't I use this approach? We will talk later, inshallah, about why we use spread instead of that. Instead of using that. Okay, so for now you have to know that using spread, which are the 3 dots, it just copies the content of these of the array of or the object. Okay, we can even use it. I'll show you how now. 1 minute. Okay, we have an object called person. Okay, it has a name, maybe Max. Okay, and I want to create another object called new person. Now I can copy the contents of person, and maybe I can add something, age, gender, whatever I want. Okay, and I can print it. It will print for me the age and the name here, which is the name from here and the age here that's added, which means that we have copied the contents of person object correctly. And as we can see, they are all inside one object. This is an object. Okay, so they are all inside one object, which means I'm not taking the object person and age 28. No, I'm copying the contents of the person object with, maybe I can add something or whatever I want. Okay, so okay, another new concept which is destructuring. It will allow us, destructuring allows us to easily extract array elements or object properties and store them in variables. We can see it clearly in this slide. I have an array which contains maybe hello and Max. Okay, now I can assign the values of, let's say, the first and the second value inside the variables without writing, maybe without even defining the array. Okay, so I can take hello as the first one and Max as the second one. If I write printed A and B, it will show me hello Max. Okay, let's try it. Maybe it's better to try it. Okay, now by using this, we have an array called numbers. Okay, now this array, it contains 1, 2, 3. I want maybe to take only the 2 values, or the first 2 values, which are 1 and 2, into A and B. But I don't want to write A equal numbers at the place at the index 0 and B equal with the old approach. No, I don't want that. It will be longer. It will be me. Even your code will not be professional. The best practice when using ES6 is to use this destructuring concept. Now, let's say I don't want to take 1 and 2. I want to take 1 and 3. So I can just leave a space in the middle. Now, if I clear and run, you will see here 1 and 3, which is the first and the last value. If I now run it again, we'll see 1 and 2, which are the first 2 values. So someone will say, okay, but what's the benefit of using this? Yes, this exactly the concept of using destructuring will be very important when using hooks. Inside the React, there's something called hooks, which is after React, I guess, version 15. I'm not sure about the number, but after a new version, they started to use something called hooks. Okay, like use state. There's we will see inshallah the hooks, all of the hooks later inshallah. But when using hooks, the value will have, let's say the variable will have 2 values. It's basically an array. So there is an approach that they use usually to assign the first value to something and the second value to something. We'll see that inshallah clearly when we write code about hooks. It will be inshallah next session. Inshallah next session. We'll write just simple hook and to show you how this works. Okay, and that's the concept of destructuring. We can even use it with objects the same way. We just need to write the name of the thing. Like if I want the name, I will just the curly braces. I will write name only. or age, I would write only age. Okay, so using this way will extract a value from an array or object easily, and this will be used, inshallah, when writing hooks, inshallah, in React. Now, that's the last thing in JavaScript ES6 Refresher, I hope. Yeah, that's the last thing. Let me tell you why we spread. I have mentioned that we use spread to copy contents of something, but why? We have to know that there's two types of data stored. Okay, there is primitive types and there is reference types. Primitive types like numbers, strings, booleans. These hold the value inside them. Like let's say, let x equal 5. Okay, this means that x contains the value 5. Okay, now if I change x later, the value will change and it will stay only with x. The same thing with string, the same thing with booleans. Okay, so which means if I copy the value of x, let's try it. Okay, let's say let x equal 5. Okay, after that I will say y equal okay, let y equal x. We'll assign the value of y into x, and after that we will say maybe change the value of y equals 4. Now if I console log the value of y, the value of x, I mean, it will be 5. It will not be changed. Okay, which means the 5 is stored inside the x. Okay, but if I use this concept in spread, it will I mean in arrays and objects, it will not be why, because an array or object is stored in the memory, but the name of the array or the object only references that place in memory, which means this array is stored in the memory. Okay, it contains some data. Array and object are the same. Okay, so I'll explain an array. Okay, it contains some data and at them some location in memory. Okay, now if I have this array, let's call it x. Okay, and I say x, let's say y equal x. Okay, so I copied x inside y. Okay, what I see that I copied x inside y, but what happens actually is that I copied the location of the data of the array inside y, which means that also y is referencing that location. X and y is referencing this location, which means that changing any value here will change the array x and the array y. If I said y at the place 2 equals 3, also x at the place 2 will equals 3, which means which is not wanted behavior when copying contents. That's why we use separate function. Okay, let's try it. Let's try it with let's say const my array equals, and I say maybe 1 2 3, and we say const new array equals my array. Now if I change new array at the place, let's say 2, which is the value here 3. Okay, because 0 1 2. Okay, and I say let it equal maybe 5, and now I try to console log the value from the first array, my array, at the place 2, it will be 5, which means even that I didn't change my array, I changed the new array. But why it's 5 here? Because they both reference the same location in the memory. So how to solve this problem? We can basically just add the 3 dots. We can use the I'm sorry. We can use the spread function here. Okay. Now if I run this, I'm sorry. Okay, maybe there's a problem with this one. Anyway, if I run this, you will see later when we use the hooks also, you will see that if I when this runs, the value will not change. The first value will not change. Again, it means that using spread allows us to copy the contents of the array into a new array, or of the object into a new object, without copying its reference in the memory, which means changing in one array or in one object will not affect the other one. Okay, and that's it for me. If you have any question, ask me, and we will go back to friend Mu'taz now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, share your screen.
Okay. Now we're gonna start by setting up the React environment. I'm gonna go step by step. You can start installing it with me.
Mu'taz, can you share your screen?
Yeah, I'm going to 1 second. The steps are already in the slides. We're gonna provide the slides later on, but I'm gonna show you a step-by-step tutorial. First, you can go to the link I'm gonna send in the chat. You can download Node.js. If you already have it, you don't have to download it again. It takes a couple of seconds to download. Already downloaded beforehand. It's simple installation. Just to next. You can install it in a different directory if you want, but it's preferred to keep it in C. After having Node.js, you can simply go to CMD. You can just write CMD in the search bar. It's preferred to run it as an administrator. I don't think you have to, but it's preferred. Then you can select the preferred directory where you want to create your React project. You can go to the D using D. I'm using a virtual machine to show you this. So I only have C, so I'm gonna go back to C. And using the CD operator, can go back, select where do you want to make a directory. I recommend making directly so it's organized. Oh, okay. Already have this directly. Then you just go and set your tree you created. Then to create a project, I'm gonna put the code in the chat 1 second. Using NBX, using Node.js where you already installed, create React app, then the app name. You can make any name you want. We'll call it first app, and then the script version. So we have using same script and to have so we don't get different errors. Using this command, it's gonna do all the work for you. Just you can click Y for proceed, and it's gonna start creating your React project. To save time, I already ran the code beforehand. You can just wait for it on your machine, but I'm gonna move forward. You'll get the screen after it finished loading. You can just using CD. It already tells you go to CD your app name. It's first app. Then simply using npm start. It's going to load your app, and wait, it will open a web page for you. But I have to share my entire screen, which is called React app. It's the default React app, and by this you created the first React app. To edit your code, you can directly using any IDE, you can write it to your code. I recommend Virtual Studio Code. You can just navigate to where you created your project in your open folder. I created it in the React project, your first app. This is the folder created by Node.js. The main code you're gonna work on is in a source. There is an HTML file, but we're probably not going to use it because we're gonna make single-page applications. All our work we're going to be done in JavaScript, specifically here. As you can see, as just a starter, you can just remove. So you can do a header. To React. Yeah, and then after saving, it will automatically update your website as long as you keep the SCMD on. It has to be on all the time that you're coding. And it's just a simple introduction. In the coming session, we'll get in more details in what specific what the specific function of render does and how it works. And I think that's all for this session. If you had an error, if you have an older version of React, example this error, if you have an older version of Node.js, you can just install npm install create app and then reinstall it. Again, I'm gonna send the slides. You can, it's already in the slides. And now Mohammed's gonna talk about what's coming in the coming session.
Yes, can you just enlarge the screen here? Okay, thank you for telling us the installation process. Now, what's next? We have finished this session, and hopefully everything is clearly. Okay. Anyway, so what's next? What we will do in the next session? In the next session, we will start creating our first component. Not just our first component. We will also start creating multiple components. We will join them together. We will pass values between components. We will use one-way binding, two-way binding. We will explain the component types. There are multiple component types. Class, functional. There's also smart and dumb components. We will use the state of the component. We will even tell you what's the best practices when using states. What's the difference between just a normal state and a use state. When we use each of them, and by the way, use state is the hook that I have mentioned before. We will also talk about style sheets, how to apply styles on the components. It will not be something that's complicated. We'll start just with some basics about React, and that will be our next session, inshallah. Now it's the time for if you have any questions. Thank you for attending, and if you have any questions, you are welcome to ask, and we will be more than happy to answer you. Inshallah, the next sessions will be in the same time. Also Tuesday every week at 8, inshallah.